This is Studio 809.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. I am your host, Hiking Bob Falcone. You can find me on my website at hikingbob.com, which has links to my social media, my former columns at the Colorado Springs Independent. We're still waiting to hear whether they'll bring me back. So if you can, support the indie, give them a donation, subscribe, become a supporter, help them out. You can go to csindy.com and check that out. All the other podcasts we've done, my photography website, and all that other kind of stuff you could find at hikingbob.com. And also, if you want to help support this podcast, you can do that at Patreon, patreon.com/hikingbob, and our patrons get rewards depending on their levels of participation. But you know, you can be a supporter for as little $3 a month, and we're always grateful for the people who help pay the bills and buy equipment and all that kind of stuff to host this podcast. So if you can support us, we would greatly appreciate that. Today, joining me again is my co-host, Kevin Wild Westendorf.
Hey everyone, it's Kevin Wild Westendorf here, and you can find me on social media on Facebook and Instagram at Wild Westendorf, and at my website at www.wildwestendorf.com.
Cool. And Kevin, this is the springtime, actually summer now. We're past Memorial Day, so we're past the unofficial start of summer. Yeah. And by the way, folks, if you hear a squeaky noise, it's not the brakes in your car. It's not the whatever it else could possibly be. It's Cole the dog, who for some reason now decides he wants to play ball and has a squeaky ball that he likes. So if you hear that, sorry about that. We're going to try and take it away from him. But when I try to get it from him, he then decides it's time to play keep away. So we'll try to keep that down. But this is summer's here. I've been out taking a lot of pictures of wildflowers and doing some really nice hikes and doing some stuff in Cheyenne Mountain State Park as a trail ambassador. We'll bring some more information up about that here in a few minutes. Kevin, what hikes have you done that were cool to do?
It's not the most unusual hike, but I did hike up to St. Mary's Falls, and it's definitely the most water flow that I've seen on the falls in many, many years. So it was really, really nice to see that. Cool.
I was nearby there on the Seven Bridges Trail, which you pass by that to go to St. Mary's Falls, and we were taking pictures of the water flowing down the creek, and it was flowing pretty good.
Yeah.
I got some beautiful pictures, those soft, flowy water pictures. It looks like cotton candy going down the creek. Some really nice pictures.
I saw those photos on Facebook, yeah.
We thought about going up to St. Mary's Falls, but it was already about noon when we started, and knowing that thunderstorms come, we said, maybe we should. And as it turned out, we did get rained on a little bit on the way back, and then it got a little rainier. So if we had been, the 3 miles up to St. Mary's Falls probably would have been a little wet and uncomfortable. And that's not even the big issue. The big issue is these storms typically come with thunder and lightning, and that's actually the bigger problem. So a couple of people, I don't know if you heard, were hit by lightning down on one of our golf courses here in town.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Last week. Yeah, I don't know how they did. I think they're okay. But lightning is an issue, especially up in the mountains, and we have dry lightning a lot where that lightning will hit, and there's not really a rainstorm going on just yet.
Yep.
So we always have to be aware of that. So, but in any case, it's looking beautiful out there. I was in Cheyenne Mountain State Park over the weekend and hiked some of the upper trails, not up to the Dixon Trail that goes up the top of Cheyenne Mountain, but the trails that go back that way, and was just looking down over the park and how green it was.
Oh,
it was
it's
just
beautiful.
Amazing. Yeah.
And it's early too, because it's usually not until later in the summer that we start to really get that green, like that vibrant green color.
Right, I agree with you, and it's looking really beautiful, and the wildflowers are coming up all over the place. So I think we're in store for a nice summer. There's more rain predicted for the next week, which gets to be kind of a pain in the butt, but it's the typical stuff. And you and I talked about this on the last show. I think that it's actually the weather we're usually supposed to get. We've just forgotten it because we haven't seen this weather in a number of years. So it's what we normally get. You get a thunderstorm around 3, 4 o'clock, maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It goes through pretty quickly. Some of them are a little more heavier than others. Some are a little more severe than others. But, that's what we're used to getting is these thunderstorms that come through here every afternoon. And we're kind of getting back to what we used to have. But with the drought and stuff, we haven't seen this in a while. So it's nice to be back to something close to normal.
Yep.
So it's all good. Any case, a lot of people out on the trails. Good time being had out there. Master plan project in the works for Blodgett Open Space, which is nice. master plan for the Fisher's Canyon open space. It's going to be
cool. Okay.
on the east side of Cheyenne Mountain and kind of north of Cheyenne Mountain State Park. That's going to be in the budget for next year. So that big swath of beautiful mountainside is going to be, at least the master plan process will start with that. So
I'm excited.
Master plan comes first and the construction comes after as money's available, but all that stuff's going to be happening. So good times for trails here in the Pikes Peak region. So we're always looking forward to that kind of stuff happening. One of the more popular trails in the area, the Mount Herman Trail, which is up in Monument, up on the north end of the county, that the road to get up there is closed for a while because some of this rain we had. The downside of all this rain is that the road's been washed out in a number of places. And so there's a gate there at the bottom at the road, and it's closed. And it's closed past the Mount Herman trailhead quite a way, so you can't even come. And there's a gate at the other end, so you can't even come in from the top side.
Oh wow!
From Rampart Range Road to get there. Some knucklehead a week or so ago decided he was going to cut the lock and drive up there anyway, and got up the road a little bit and put his truck nose first into a big washout and got stuck. And
I think I saw something about that. Yeah,
had to get rescue. And I haven't talked to the Forest Service law enforcement people. We had Earl Huey on here, the law enforcement officer, one of them for this area. But boy, am I hoping he got arrested and got the silver bracelets and taken away for being a complete knucklehead. There's a reason why those gates are on there, and not for you to cut the gates and think you know better than the people who are managing our lands.
Exactly.
And trust me, they don't want to cut these. They don't want to put these gates up. But typically, when they do, it's for your safety, or they're preserving the resource, one or the other, which means you shouldn't be up there. So, sometimes you just wonder what the collective IQ drain is sometimes on society. That makes sense. And to be fair, 99.999% of the people are going to see something like that, realize there's a reason why they shouldn't be up there, and they're not going to go. It's the 0.0001% knucklehead that's going to go up there and attract all the attention and be an idiot. And hopefully, like I've said before, be dealt with in a severe and harsh manner. And I don't want to get political here, but we have a constitutional prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment. I'd like to see... The cruel part can stay, but I like to see the unusual part taken off of there. Maybe we should indulge in some unusual punishments for some people. Just saying. Because
I do know there are folks out there, and I'm not saying this guy was in this mindset, but there are a lot of folks out there who think that because it's public land or their tax dollars help pay for it, that they have every right to get into it and walk around and put themselves in danger, put others in danger, especially if it's search and rescue. It has to go up there when the road is washed out. There's conditions to that. Like, yes, you have freedom of speech, but not freedom from consequences. Right. And it's like, you can't go into a theater and yell fire and stuff. You would get in trouble. Because this is public land and your tax dollars pay for it, it doesn't mean it's always going to be available to you. And like you said, these land managers are going to have a good reason for it.
And to be fair, our tax dollars pay, our tax dollars go for us to pay people to manage those public lands for us. And for the people who think that, they're taxpayers and they should be able to go where they want, I'm a taxpayer and I don't think you should. So
correct.
Whose
Yep.
rights win? Well, we hire managers to determine those things. And I'm not saying that there have been cases in places where land managers have probably behaved in a inappropriate manner and maybe a little harshly, but those things tend to eventually come out in the wash and get taken care of, and there's processes to do that. But if you cut the lock on a gate and go up a road that's closed, and then you get stuck, well, I hope you enjoy paying the very hefty bill for your tow out of there and the damage to your vehicle. And
I can't imagine how expensive that
and hopefully
be.
Criminal prosecution to go with it. So
yeah.
You may think you're the hot shot going up there, but in actuality, you're just an idiot. So, but for everybody else who plays by the rules and does what they're supposed to do and behaves appropriately, to you, I say thank you for being a good example.
Yeah, thank you.
of how people are supposed to behave on our public lands. Let's talk a little bit more about crime. There was an incident about 10 days ago, I want to say by now, that attracted a lot of news attention. And it was a horrific incident. Somebody was stabbed multiple times, sustained very severe injuries. The assailant left the scene. There was a big manhunt, and this happened at the Bar Trailhead parking lot in Manitou Springs. This is the trail that goes up to the top of Pikes Peak, and it's near the start of the Manitou Incline. And the person was eventually caught. There was a big manhunt. There were cops all over Manitou Springs. There was the sheriff. There was Manitou Springs Police. There was State Patrol. There were a lot of people out there looking for this guy. The bad guy was eventually caught, and he's been arrested. But since it happened on a thing that ends with trail, Bar Trail, the news media blew this up to be, it's not safe to be hiking on a trail. I was interviewed by Fox 21, and Maggie Wolanski interviewed me. She did a pretty good job of, she talked to somebody about how to defend yourself and be safe, and I came on there and said, this really didn't have much to do with the trail, but, it's a good reminder that you should always be aware of your surroundings. And that's good for a number of reasons. There's a lot of reasons why you should always be aware of your surroundings, weather, animals, other people. There's a chance you may run into somebody but what happened here was it actually had nothing to do with the trail. The poor person who was the victim of this picked up the suspect and decided to give him a ride. Somebody he didn't know, so he can question the idea of that, but we're not going to victim shame. He was trying to do a nice thing, giving a guy a ride. He gave him a ride to the Bar Trail parking lot. For what reason, I don't know, and I don't know all the details other than what I've seen printed. And then the bad guy decided to, for some reason, stab him many, many times. And the victim, stumbles out of the car in the Bar Trail parking lot, and people who were there came to his aid, called the police, and then set in motion rescuing this person and get him to a hospital and the manhunt for the bad guy. It could have just as easily been any parking lot.
Yeah.
None of these people were on the trail at the time it happened. They weren't hikers. They weren't runners. They weren't anything like that. It could have just as easily been the many, many parking lots or places to park they passed on the way to the Bar Trail. And I wonder if they even knew where they were going because the Bar Trail parking lot is at the end of a road. You get there and the only place to go is back the way you came.
Yeah.
I guess my message here is they made a big deal about it and talked to a lot of hikers. And to be fair, a lot of hikers are like, well, this is kind of shocking, but I'm still going to go hiking, which is my thing. My message was this shouldn't stop you from doing it. It's not like somebody was assaulted halfway up the trail by somebody who legitimately was, that was actually a trail incident.
Yeah.
Far more likely to be injured at something that you do. You slip and fall, you twist an ankle, you blow out a knee, you get bit by a rattlesnake, which is the chance of that are even less, than to be the subject or the victim of a violent crime by another person when you're out hiking. So what my message is that be aware of your surroundings. You should have some idea of how to defend yourself, how to protect yourself. But realize that more than likely, if you're going to have a problem out there, it's probably going to be weather-related or injury-related and probably not violent crime-related. And my goal here is just to keep this in perspective. Not victim blaming this guy at all. The guy's trying to do a nice thing, and that didn't work out so well. The bad guy, again, we go back to severe and harsh penalties, and maybe we get rid of the cruel and unusual part of the, and he should be dealt with then as severe and harshly as the law permits, because there's just no reason for this kind of stuff. But I think
it definitely sounds like it was a brutal enough attack that it should be attempted murder.
Yeah, and it may very well be. So when you hear these things, know that. Can we say that there's not violent crime that occurs on hiking trails around the country? No, we can't. There is some. There's well-documented cases that happen along the Appalachian Trail and places like that. The odds of things, like anything else, are pretty slim. And it's important to remember, too, that except for a tiny, 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 tiny percentage of crimes, most violent crimes that happen are between two people with some type of pre-existing relationship of some type. Their acquaintances, their domestic partners, their friends, something like that, business associates. And that is where, I forget the percentage, it's under 1%. I mean, it's a tiny percentage of actual stranger-on-stranger violent crime. Again, not saying it doesn't happen. Of course it does. We know it does. But in reality, the chances of that happening are pretty slim. So I want people to be aware of their surroundings. I want them to know what's going on around them. I don't want people to be so paranoid that they decide they're not going to go out there. You should be more paranoid about the mountain lions, the bears, and the weather than you should be about somebody hurting you out there. But on the other hand, be aware of what's going on. And I know I'm sounding like I'm taking both sides of this, but I don't want to be an alarmist in this thing, which some of the news media just jumped all over about how this, if it occurred a half a mile down the road, Bar Trail would have never entered into it.
And I think in my 10 years of hiking now almost, because I believe next month is the 10-year anniversary since I did that first group hike with you, and I was like miserable, but I was like, the views are really nice up here. I want more of this, but I can say I've seen 3 weirdos on the trails, and that's in 10 years. That's at least a couple thousand miles of hiking that I've done in that time. So out of the hundreds and hundreds of other folks I've seen on the trails, I can specifically think of 3 individuals who were just being weird.
Did you feel uncomfortable, like threatened by them, or just you thought they were just a little off?
One guy was just just smacking the same tree over and over again with an axe, the Muskoka Trail. And also on the Muskoka Trail, I saw another guy who had a machete. Really feel in danger with him. I think he just overdid it on protection. And the third guy was one I saw in a Red Rock Canyon open space who was just carrying a giant knife.
Okay.
But not, I wouldn't say I felt in danger of any of them. It's just the vibe was off.
Yeah. And that's okay. Use your sixth sense. If you feel that something's weird, then maybe it's a good opportunity for you to maybe stay away from that person.
And keep an eye out on your surroundings. Make sure there's distance between you and the weirdo,
And I was talking to one of our park rangers yesterday at the state park. They had somebody there who was upset because they were hiking and they felt somebody was hiking too close to them. The person complaining he thought was kind of being unreasonable. But, I always try to pay attention to how my presence affects other people. So, for example, I'm a single guy hiking by myself and I'm wearing a pack and I've got a knife on the shoulder, shoulder strap on my thing. Which is, it's not a huge, big Bowie knife or anything like that, but it's a decent-sized knife, but it's one of the 10 essentials to carry a knife, and I'm hiking by myself, and when you encounter a single woman hiking by herself, or maybe 2 women, I'm not a big guy, so I'm not necessarily intimidating, but I always make a point of not being in their very tight presence for very long. I'll either get ahead of them and just keep going, maybe speed up my pace just to put some distance. And the point is I'm trying to make them feel comfortable that I'm there. Maybe I'll say hi to them and see, just chat a little bit, make them feel comfortable. If not, if I get the vibe they don't want to talk, that's fine. I'm not going to sit there and try to force an argument. But my thing is, I also pay attention to how my presence may affect other people there. So I'm not going to stay right behind them and follow 20 feet behind them. Maybe I'll stop and take pictures and take a break and let them get some distance, or I'll get ahead of them, or maybe I'll take a side trail just to, you know what I'm saying? So
yeah, I've done that a lot. Where if I can't really get ahead of them, then I will stop. I'll tie my shoes. If I have service, I'll check on my phone, or I'll do photos, and that's not just a trail thing. I mean that's a thing you practice as a male,
right?
And it's just an unfortunate fact of society, because I've got a lot of female friends who won't hike alone,
right,
and stuff. It's just a safety thing, but for us, that's nothing to think about. On the other hand, if I were that guy and I felt like someone was hiking too close to me, I would stop and let them pass me. Right. And then, if they continue to stay really close, and then I'd be like, okay, this is weird, or I would take a different trail or something. Yeah.
And I usually try to get ahead of people. This way they can see me so they feel more comfortable because they know where I'm at. It's just one of those things. Just pay attention to what's going on around you, and not only pay attention to who's around you and how they affect you, but how you may affect other people. So that's kind of my thing with this whole incident that happened on Bar Trail. It really didn't have anything to do with the trail. It just happened to be that was the parking lot at the end of the road. That's where they ended up. They could have very easily ended up somewhere else. And like I said, if they were just a little ways down the street, the trail part of this would have never played into it, even though the same thing could have happened there. I hope the victim comes out of this okay.
Yeah.
And does all right. I haven't heard any updates, so I'm hoping they're on the road to getting healthy again. I hope the person who did this, who's accused of doing this, the alleged suspect, I hope, like I said, if they're convicted, ends up going to a far, far away place where it's dark and dirty and damp and lives out their life in misery so they don't get to do this to somebody else again.
Yeah, I completely agree, because just whether it happened at the trailhead or at the store or the mall, like a city park, the attack, from what I've read about it, was vicious and scary. I mean, it's a scary thing to happen and think about, but it's also good to remind yourself that violence like that is actually very, very rare, especially in the outdoors too. So
yeah. So just be careful out there. Just pay attention to what's going on around you. Just be aware of it, and just keep that in mind that, you're probably more likely just going to hurt yourself doing something out there than anything else. So while we're talking about crime and everything, and again, I want to make it clear that violent crime in our trails and park systems around here are very rare. Property crime, on the other hand, is a different issue altogether. We've known about issues with vehicle break-ins at trailheads. Yeah. That kind of comes and goes in waves, and I see stuff from all around the country. This is a common thing. So, obviously, don't leave your stuff on the front seat where somebody can see it. Thieves are lazy. They're going to look in your windows, and if they see something, they're going to smash a window, grab it, and run. They don't see anything. They don't want to risk getting caught, so they're not going to, for the most part. The smart ones, anyway. And, there's some smart criminals out there, I guess. But I had an incident happen to me about a week and a half ago. And I didn't mention on last week's podcast because I was still processing it in my mind. And I didn't want to talk to some people about this. I was at one of our open spaces, and there was an event there at the parking lot. And I was there for that event, me and Cole. And then after that, we went for a hike. And, while we were on the hike, the event, closed up, and we were still hiking. So a lot of people left. So I come back around about a couple hours later, and there's another car in the parking lot, just me and one other vehicle. And there's these two young males, and one of them has a rifle or a long weapon of some type, which is kind of concerning. Why are you walking around a parking lot of one of our open spaces with something that looks like a rifle? Now, remember, I'm a military person, was a police officer in the Air Force. I've qualified on a number of different weapons. So I knew what this was. It wasn't an assault weapon kind of a thing. But as I'm looking at these two guys, and I don't know what they're doing, and they're walking around with this rifle, they're obviously up to something. And they're in an area that's surrounded by homes. So I'm watching them, and as they see me approaching, they decide they're going to kind of hide on the other side of their car from me. So I'm just being aware of my surroundings. I don't feel threatened per se, but to give this some perspective, it's not like they had a handgun and it was holstered. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, because I've seen that a bunch of times on trails.
They were actually brandishing a rifle. And it is illegal to discharge a firearm within the city limits. So what are they doing with this rifle in a city open space? Why are they out there with this thing? What are they planning on doing with this long gun? It could have even been a shotgun, but I'm pretty sure it was a rifle. It didn't look like it had a barrel big enough for a shotgun. And my car is parked about 15, 20 feet away from him, so I didn't get that close to him. But it's obvious the one kid who had the gun is on the other side of the car, deliberately trying to stay out of my sight.
Okay. That's a little...
Yeah, so they know they're up to something, and why are they out there? And it's concerning enough to me, and now mind you, I'm a gun owner. I have a concealed weapons permit. I carry a gun with me sometimes I don't. I have guns here at the house. So I'm not necessarily alarmed, and I'm not a big gun person, but I'm not an anti-gun person, but I'm very much a responsible use of gun person. So there's no reason why I can understand why they're brandishing this weapon in the city limits in a parking lot. There's nothing they're supposed to be shooting around there. To be fair, I didn't see him shooting anything. Didn't hear any gunshots. Still, it concerned me enough, though, that I felt that somebody should probably check these guys out. So I called 911, and I have a dash cam on my car. So as I pulled away, I kind of pointed it so that I got a view of at least one of them, because the other one was deliberately hiding from me, and a view of their vehicle and a view of the license plate on the dash cam recorded. I have since saved that recording. And then before I'm even out of the parking lot, I'm on the phone with 911. And my concern is, hey, I don't know what these two idiots are doing. There's houses all around. Somebody should probably check this out. And I'm pretty calm and level-headed about this. I didn't feel immediately threatened, but I was enough to worry me. But I don't know what somebody else coming up there behind me would be. Is that going to be somebody else who's armed and going to take offense to this? Is that going to be somebody who's scared of them and be scared of these two knuckleheads up there with a rifle in the city parking, open space parking lot? What's going to happen there? And there's houses below there. So anything you're doing, there's houses around there.
Yeah.
You can't be shooting a gun. And that prohibition in the city of Colorado Springs even applies to pellet guns.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which I'm not sure I agree with that, but it is what I think a BB gun's a BB gun. I wouldn't mind putting up a target behind my fence here and, shooting it. It's not going to go through the fence or anything. But in any case, that's what the ordinance is in the city limits. So I call 911. I tell the person what I saw. I said, I feel uncomfortable with this. There's people up there with a rifle. I gave them descriptions. I gave them the license plate number. I gave them the vehicle description. And I said, somebody needs to go check these two guys out and see what they're up to, but they shouldn't be up there with brandishing a rifle. Think nothing else of it. Expect that CSPD is going to look into it. The 911 operator said, do you want somebody to call? I said, not necessarily, but somebody needs to check these two idiots out. And I think I even used the words idiots. So 5 hours later, I get a call from a CSPD. It's almost 5 hours to the minute, because I know what time I left because it's on my dash cam. I'm on my phone, and I have the phone call on my cell phone from the officer call me. 5 hours later, the CSPD officer calls me. They're just now getting to the call. Wow.
That's frustrating.
That's unacceptable.
Yeah. Especially in today's climate with, like, as we all know in the news of stuff that happens a lot now, that's something they just cannot, what's the word I'm trying to think. That kind of stuff should be taken extremely seriously, especially because it could have led, especially in that 5 hour time period, they could have led to an altercation or scaring someone else, or they decide to follow through on any plans that they might have had. Who knows?
Right. It is completely unacceptable. Now, I'm not saying this deserves 6 cars running red lights and sirens up there to check these guys out. 5 hours later, on what should have been a fairly high priority call, is complete, and it's the first time I'm going to say this on this podcast, bullshit.
Especially when a call could have taken 10 minutes at the most, like, to stop them, talk to them, find out, like, you guys are...
Take your guns and go home.
Yeah.
That's all it would have taken, if they weren't doing anything else.
Correct, yeah.
If they're just being stupid, then they just tell stupid and stupider to go home. But 5 hours is completely unacceptable. And Colorado Springs police, it is apparent to me that they don't give a rat's about what goes on in the city parks. They could talk it all they want, but they don't care. Because when I'm calling in on 911, telling them there's a couple of idiots up there with a rifle in a place they don't have any business having a rifle. And by the way, it's not hunting season. These idiots aren't going hunting anywhere either. And it takes them 5 hours, because when the officer called me, I thought maybe she was going to say, we caught the guys, we did something. So what did you see? I said, it's been 5 hours.
Jeez. No,
they could talk all they want about how they take crime seriously. Bullshit. This is clear evidence that the Colorado Springs Police Department doesn't give a rat's about what's going on in our city parks. Because if they did, it wouldn't take them 5 hours to show up at a place where I told them there were a couple of idiots up there with a rifle.
And I'm assuming I would be familiar with this parking lot.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm not saying where it is because I don't want the neighbors there to get alarmed.
Oh, it makes sense, yeah.
If they're listening, but I will tell you it's on the north side of the town. It's just complete, utter garbage. And Colorado Springs Police Department should be ashamed of themselves that a person with a gun call takes 5 hours. By the way, I watched the news that day. there was not a lot going on. There were no homicides going on in town. There were no big car wrecks going on in town. There were no armed robberies going on in town. There were not a lot of things going on in town that were higher priority or so high a priority that it would delay officers getting there for 5 hours. There were no armed standoffs. There were no SWAT operations going on. None of that stuff going on. I get it's a busy day. And I want to make it clear. I'm not blaming the officer. I want to make that clear. The officer, I'm sure, was probably as frustrated as I am that it took so long for somebody to get to this call. This is an organizational thing. This is an institutional thing. This is I don't give a damn thing by the higher-ups of the Colorado Springs Police Department that it takes them this damn long to respond to a call of somebody with a gun in one of our city parks.
Especially when they're not... No, I don't think this is a controversial thing, but like every year they're asking for more and more and more money to address this thing, and it's still an issue.
Right. And I get they don't have enough police officers. We're way undermanned in the police department. I get that. But I'd like to know what they were doing for 5 hours that it took them to respond to somebody with a gun call in the parking lot of one of our open spaces. There's nothing they could be doing legally with that gun up there. And again, I'm going to repeat, I'm not an anti-gun person. I think responsible ownership of guns is a fine thing, and I am one of those owners, and I carry a gun sometimes with me. I have it. When I was in the Air Force, I certified as an expert with a handgun and with a rifle, and I was certified on machine guns and grenade launchers and all this kind of stuff when I was in the Air Force. I'm not afraid of guns. I'm not afraid of people with guns who are behaving in an appropriate manner. These two idiots were not behaving in an appropriate manner.
Especially the fact that one of them was deliberately trying to hide, too. So it sets off all kinds of alarms in my head.
And they know they shouldn't have been doing whatever they were doing up there. So to our new mayor, who's taking office in a week, who has the ability and the right to hire and fire and do whatever he wants with his department heads, take a look at your police chief. Because right now he is failing at his job. When a citizen's calling 911 for somebody with a weapon in a park, and it takes 5 hours for them to respond. Maybe it's time for a police chief who's going to take his job seriously. Maybe it's time that the police department takes their job seriously, that this is the kind of stuff that you're worried about, and this is how long it takes you to respond to it. Suppose I'm some tourist from somewhere else, and I just go nuts up there because there's somebody up there with a rifle. I at least kind of understand what's going on, and I'm, like I said, I didn't feel immediately at danger. You know, part of it is me, should I approach these guys and ask them what the hell they're doing? No, that's not my job. And if I approach them with a weapon, is that going to trigger them? Yeah. So my thing was, I feel okay, let's get the dog in the car, let's get out of here, and let's call for somebody. It should not take 5 hours for them to respond to that call. I've given this information to the Parks Department. They're following up. They have a copy of my video. I told them what happened.
What baffles me is that I know if I pulled into a parking lot at a trailhead and there's one other car there and there's two men there, which I think you made it sound like they were younger men.
Yeah, they were probably in their early 20s.
Okay. And if I saw a rifle, I would turn back. I mean, because that's a demographic that we all know that historically in recent years have had not a good blend of items and people right there. So yeah, I would have all kinds of thoughts. I wouldn't want to park near them or far away and act all weird and skittish, which then might trigger them to be like, hey, what's going on and stuff. Because I've been harassed in public in broad daylight at like the stores and or the mall one time. When someone is acting weird and they can tell like that I'm kind of like, oh, okay, like I'm avoiding them, then they try to trigger me by like saying like, hey, come over here, are you scared? Like what
they're trying to incite you into doing something.
That's the word. Yeah.
You know, and this would be different if I was pulling up at a trailhead deep in the national forest, for example, where you can go shooting.
Yeah.
And people may be hunting. Again, it's not hunting season. You don't go hunting in the summer. Not any hunting season I'm aware of. Typical hunting season, fall and winter. You know, if you're pulling up to a place like this in the national forest where shooting is allowed and you're allowed to do target practice and stuff, now, as people may have heard when I did the podcast with the Forest Service law enforcement for this area, that's going to change here pretty rapidly. But regardless, it's a matter of where it was. This was in a park in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
There's no reason for them to be up there brandishing a weapon in there. And if, like I said, if it was somebody there with a holstered handgun, wouldn't bother me. If it's somebody there with a handgun and they're waving it around, I'm going to be on the phone because you have no business being there waving your gun around. That's not responsible, and why are you doing that? So it would have done the same thing. So in any case, and I know I'm going to hear from somebody who said they would have taken their gun and they would have taken them down. Well, you know what? That's risky, and it just wasn't any need for it. Nobody was being threatened immediately at the time. If they were threatening somebody, I might have done something different. But, I spent 38 years being a hero. I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm not, and I just don't want to be that person unless I absolutely positively. So my choice was to leave them alone, not antagonize them, call the authorities, who should not have taken 5 hours to show up there. Just to, like I said, they could have just told these guys, hey, stupid, put your gun away, go home, put it away, and come back later. Would have been the appropriate thing, at the very least, for the police to do. The fact that it took them, of course they're not going to find it. I was shocked that it was 5 hours later they're just getting there. Are you kidding me?
And I'm pretty sure I know which open space it is based on what you said. And yeah, there had to have been several units close by to just do a quick stop, pull up, be like, all right, what's the story here, guys?
Right.
And then resolve it and leave.
Right. Or take whatever action would have been appropriate.
Yeah.
But somebody needed to go up there. And this is also a place where the neighbors have been complaining about activities going on in this open space parking lot after hours, even though there's a gate there. They're going up there. And so it's a spot that they're familiar there's issues with, because neighbors are calling the police all the time. And still, this is what happens. So as much as I say you're still pretty safe on the park in our parks and open spaces, there are still idiots out there doing stuff that's pretty stupid. And I don't know what to tell people. Should you call the cops? Yeah, you should call the cops. You expect them to take 5 hours to respond to something like this? Heck no. This isn't like a random vandalism thing where nobody's injured and you don't know who did it and you don't have any descriptions and we'll get to it when we take a report. I get that those things are low priority. This should not have been that low a priority. This should have happened this way. So I am extremely disappointed in the police department. I'm going to make it clear I am not upset with the officer. They got the call when they got the call. They were going when they were told to go. But this is an institutional issue with the police department that on one hand they're saying we're serious about crime. On the other hand, when somebody's calling something in with people with a weapon, that this is how long it takes them to decide to send somebody up there. Who failed to do this? Who failed to give this call to somebody to check on for this long a period of time? Was it somebody at dispatch didn't do their job? Was it some sergeant who decided when to send officers up there? Who's responsible for this taking this long? Again, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect to see a parade of cars running up there, red lights and siren on my way out of there. I get that. I didn't expect that. But I surely didn't expect that it was going to take this long for somebody to go drive. Of course, there's nobody there. There's probably six or seven other cars that have been in and out of there in that time frame that's had nothing to do with this. And I don't even know what happened. And let that out.
Breathe in, breathe out.
Breathe in, breathe out. Nobody got hurt.
Yes.
This is what counts. But anyway. Kevin, let's talk about some good stuff.
Cool. Let's do it.
In North Cheyenne Canyon, the popular Mount Cutler Trail, extremely popular. As we know, it's a nice trail. The Mount Muskoka Trail that I was responsible for building comes off of that. But it's had pretty crappy parking. It was dirt parking on a slope up against a hillside, so it would fill in with dirt. There was no parking spaces and kind of a mess. Well, the city closed down that parking lot for a couple of weeks, and they've since paved it, striped it, curbed it, and it's now very nice. So now there's actually defined parking, so park only where the slots are there. Still not a lot of parking there because it's in one of the narrowest parts of the canyon. There's a parking lot up against a hillside on one side of the road. On the other side of the road, there's a creek and then another hillside. It's a very narrow spot. Yeah. But they did make it better. So it is an actual really, I drove by there over the weekend. There's really nice parking space there. It's also where the Creekside Trail, one of the newer trails, comes off of the Mid-Columbine Trail. And there's always been a creek crossing there. Yeah. But the creek crossing was never vertical. It's just graded. And it had to go down the steep embankment to the creek and then across a plank bridge and back up. That during this project, they also redid that entire crossing with steps and everything. So not only is the Mount Cutler Trail parking improved, but they've actually improved the crossing at the Creekside Trail where it comes across and runs right up to Mount Cutler, which the nice thing about that is you can now park further down the park, like at Starsmore Discovery Center or at the Mid-Columbine, and still access Mount Cutler by staying on trails. Before you couldn't do that because it was a trailhead halfway up a road and there was no trailheads near it. So that's also been part of this. So that's a pretty cool thing that the Mount Cutler Trail has now an actual paved parking space. So kudos to the city for putting that in the Parks Department and Public Works and whoever else did that project for getting that done.
Cool.
Happy to see it. As people know, I'm a trail ambassador at Cheyenne Mountain State Park. I'm actually the volunteer leader of that group of people, and we are looking for new trail ambassadors. We are taking applications for volunteer positions as trail ambassadors. The link in the you gotta like the way the state does things. The link is about 40 characters long, so I'm not even gonna try to repeat it here. I will put it in bit.ly so it gets to be a nicely reduced URL, and then I will put it in the show notes for this podcast. So if you're interested in becoming a trail ambassador, you can email me if you like. If you go to my website, there's a link where you can send me a message, or you can just go to this link, and there's actually a description of it. You have to fill out a volunteer application with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. We want people who are personable, who are knowledgeable, who can relate to people. You have to be pretty outgoing. You have to initiate, hi, how you doing? Can I help you with anything? Last weekend when I was there, I just talked to people in the parking lot of the visitor center who I saw that had dogs. And I was like, well, before you go up on this trail, let me tell you where you can have your dogs and where you can't have your dogs. And they were appreciative because they had maps. They weren't sure how to read them. And I said, well, just take this road, and here's where you can hike with your dog, and here's where you can't. That's the kind of stuff a trail ambassador does. You go out there. We also check on trail conditions. Well, the trail crew looks at the notes that the trail ambassadors file after their trips and looks at the notes on trail conditions and use that to determine where to go out and take care of trail issues. So it's the eyes and ears of the park staff. We report on issues. I've reported missing signs, and they've gone back up there and replaced the signs, and trails that are eroded. And we also talk about where we're seeing wildflowers and wildlife, because people stop at the visitor center and say, hey, where can I see wildflowers? Well, our trail ambassador just saw them here or there. So it's really a lot of fun. Trail ambassadors either hike or they do it on bike. So if you're a cyclist and you want to be a part of this, we definitely accept cyclists too, and they cover more ground, and they can relate better to the cyclist than I can as a hiker. So they talk to cyclists and stuff like that. So there will be a link in the show notes. I also put a link in the newsletter that'll be coming out this week. So if you're not a subscriber to my newsletter, this is a good reason to do that. You can also do that at my website. And one last thing for me is I'm doing a wildflower photography class at the Guard of the Gods on Saturday, June 10th. You can sign up for that. There's a small fee for that, which part of that goes to the Guard of the Gods Visitor Center. And that also has a very long link, so I will reduce that and put that in the show notes. It'll also be in my newsletter. But if you want to know some of my secrets to taking great wildflower photos, you can come to this workshop. It's a short one. It's only a couple hours, but the idea is not to teach you photography from the base up, but just teach you some pointers on how to make your pictures better. Because there's some common mistakes people make that I'm just going to tell them, well, if you move this way or move that way, and it works whether you have a cell phone or a regular camera.
Oh, yeah.
People with regular cameras might get a little more out of it because that's what I shoot with, but definitely if you're a cell phone user and you want to just know how to make better pictures, this is going to help you do that. So
cool.
Check that out in the show notes, and also check that out in my newsletter. And it's also been posted. Both of these have been posted on my social media accounts, of which you can also link to those. You can find links to those also on my website. So just go to hikingbob.com to find out more information on all this stuff. So there we are. Kevin, what do you got? You got anything else before we go?
Nope, I think I'm good.
I think I vented my spleen enough on this one. People, I don't rant about stuff very much. And I've never cursed on the show, and I made a couple of small ones on this one. I didn't drop the big one. But that should give you an idea how upset about this. I hope you're as upset about it as I am. If you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm overreacting, let me know. If this bothers you as much as it bothers me, maybe you need to make a call to your local council person or the incoming mayor's office, or maybe the police chief's office, and say, why did it take you so long to respond to this incident? On the other hand, if you think it's no big deal, tell me. Maybe I'm overreacting. Always like to hear from the listeners and hear what they have to say. I think, Kevin, with that, we'll say goodbye.
And we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast.
Before you go, did you know you can rate and review our Studio 809 podcasts? That will help us because our egos really need to have thousands and thousands of listeners. But that helps our wonderful sponsors reach more ears too. And we do love our sponsors. So just go to Studio 809 or any individual 809 podcast in your iTunes or podcast app and click on ratings and reviews. Thanks.